Dun, dun, dun. Long time no chat. Welcome back. Another episode 4. I'm very excited. Exam season was a crazy time. Let me just tell you guys, I don't get stressed out a lot, but when exam season comes around for some reason, I never think I'm going to be stressed out. But then I look back and I'm like, wow, I was stressed. And I always say I wasn't. But then I look back afterwards at like how chill I'm feeling now, and I'm like, wow, I really was stressed. I just wasn't like thinking about it that clearly. But anyways, I hope for everybody that's in school listening to this that you guys had good exams too, and happy summer everyone. I'm very excited at summer. Few things before I get started. One, this summer is going to build a lot. At the beginning, it's probably going to be still pretty slow, and then going to really pick up around June, and then hopefully July and August, like follow the pace of June. But as far as like everyone goes, everybody's getting settled into their jobs. Everybody's like finishing up school, like moving into new places and everything like that. So a lot of people are busy hence like why I'm doing this one alone again. But hopefully you guys don't mind listening to me chat and talk to myself the whole time anyways. So yeah, we're going to get started. This is a heavy topic. It's one I wanted to talk about in an episode alone because I feel like although having other people would really add to it and grow the conversation, this is something that really applies to my life and stuff, because if you guys have listened to episode 1, I have had to learn how to acknowledge my privilege and my position and my identity, like outside of who I am, like who I know myself as. Like, I mean, my identities like sexuality, race, gender, all of these things that people see me as and society like perceives me as and stuff. It's hard. Like, it's really hard. And I look back on my life and I like cringe at how I used to approach it. But I have to give myself grace too, because I was learning and I was trying my best. But wow. It's difficult. Guilt is such a hard thing, especially because I think I said this in episode 1 too. It's when you feel guilty, it means that you care. It means that you know something is wrong or something is off or something's not right, and you care and you don't think it's right and you feel guilty. And what happens when we feel guilty is that it shuts us down. It completely paralyzes us, because the only time you can move on from guilt is when both the other person has forgiven you, or the group of whatever, the other being, entity, group, whatever it is that you've done harm to, whether it be like a person or a group of people or whatever. When that has been forgiven, and then also when you learn to forgive yourself. And guilt won't go away until you can do those things. And I think what happens is people wait to be forgiven before they start forgiving themselves, because it's very important here that I'm just going to make like the distinction. I think that forgiving yourself is a journey, and it means that you're doing work, you're learning, you're growing. You can't just do something bad and then be like, oh, it's okay. Like, you know what I mean? I can't just like, I couldn't have the day after I said something mean to someone been like, I'm a different person, I forgive myself. They might not forgive me yet, but I forgive myself. No, I need to go and do the work. I need to apologize wholeheartedly. I need to educate myself, whether it be to go to therapy. I could talk to my friends and say, hey, have you guys noticed this behavior out of me? Like, you could seek out advice from people. You can start journaling about how you want to be better. You can start like practicing like being kinder to people. Hopefully I'm painting the picture here, is that when you are forgiving yourself, you're taking the actions necessary to actually be better. Because when you apologize, an apology means nothing if you're not actually planning on changing the behavior. Don't apologize if you're not planning on changing the behavior. There is actually nothing worse for you and for the other person to apologize when you do not mean it. Apologize when you mean it. If you don't mean it, then wait until you do, or just don't. I'm not saying it's right to withhold an apology if someone else deserves one. I'm saying that it's not fair to apologize if you don't mean it. And like the biggest example of this is sometimes I miscommunicate myself. It happens a lot. Like one time this was like last week or the week before, I thought one of my friends was coming over the day after and she was coming over that day. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I totally spaced. I have something else to do. Like, can we do it another day? To me, and to me, that's like, it wasn't my intention to blow her off or to cancel on her last minute. And I don't feel like I don't care about our friendship and I want to hang out with her, but she may not know all of those things. So if she comes to me and she says, hey, it really, really hurt my feelings when you canceled on me last minute the other day. Like, I understand that things come up, but it just like next time, could we just try and like figure it out and like you could write it down. It just made me feel a little bit like insignificant that you didn't remember when we were supposed to be hanging out. And I would feel so guilty. And you want to respond and just be like, that's not what I meant. Like, that's not what I did. I wasn't trying to be a bad friend. I had something come up. I'm allowed to cancel. And all of those things are true. But if you sit down and breathe and learn how to be like, I am so sorry that I made you feel that way. It was not my intention at all, but I could totally see how that would make you upset, because I think if you cancel on me last minute, I would be upset too. And maybe you wouldn't, but it's like taking the time to say, oh my God, that is horrible. And I'm so sorry you feel that way. It wasn't my intention, but that's how I made you feel. And like next time, I want you to know I'm going to write it down and I'm going to do better. And what you need to do is next time you need to write it down and you need to do better and you need to try harder to remember things. Or you could say to them, I'm really sorry. I'm having a bad time with my memory. I don't have the mental space to work on my memory right now, but I hope you know that I still love you and I still really care about you, and I'm sorry that I canceled on you last minute. And that's okay too. If you're not ready to work on something, you just need to be honest. Be like, I'm sorry, I'm not ready to work on that right now, but I still love you and I want you to know that I care about you. Is there something else I could do? Or anything along those lines. And what happens then is you feel so much better. Like, I'm going to give another example, and this actually happened. One time my friend was posting like just some like silly things on her Snapchat story, and she hadn't posted in a long time, and she had like, I think, texted in our group chat earlier that day or something that she was like struggling and she's wanted someone to talk to. So, and then later on when I saw everything on her story, I was like, oh, maybe she's like wants to talk to people and like, you know what I mean? So I called her and I kind of said to her, I don't remember what I said, but I can admit now, like, I totally phrased it wrong. I said something like, oh, your story made me feel like you were like, you like needed someone to talk to. And of course, my intention was to say that you said you needed someone to talk to, and then I saw your story and it made me remember. But what I kind of said to her and what she heard from me is that what she wanted to post on her story to be fun actually was concerning, and that she couldn't post on her story without her friends being concerned for her well-being. And that's hurtful, right? Is that you want to be fun and you want to be silly, and then people are like, why are you having fun? Why are you being silly? I totally get that, because I think that's a big part of like my personality too. I'm usually very mellow and very calm. So like when I act out and when I say things, people are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, okay, never mind. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to do that anymore, because it's just like, so she called me a couple days later and she's like, hey, can we talk? What you said like really hurt my feelings. This is how it made me feel, blah, blah, blah. And the first thing I wanted to say was like, well, that's not what I meant, or that's not exactly what I said, or like, I was just worried about you. Like, I just care about you. I'm your friend. But when you take a second, take a deep breath, and you realize that your friend is telling you this because they love you and they want to feel loved by you, and that they care about you so much that they're willing to communicate with you, that I just like, I'm getting emotional now. Like, all I could say to her was like, thank you so much for telling me that, because I would never want to make you feel that way. And imagine if she had never told me that, and she had never asked me what my intention was, and she just continued on thinking that every time she's silly that I'm going to think she's weird, or that she's acting out of character, and that I'm going to be concerned for her. When in reality, that's not really what it was. And that could have built like a huge wall in our friendship and a lot of resentment. And because she communicated with me, I was able to like say, oh my God, yeah, I totally should have phrased that differently. And you are so allowed to post whatever you want on your story. And leaving that conversation, every time I think about it now, I don't feel guilty. You know what I mean? It's like when you communicate through with someone, they tell you how you feel, and you respond by putting yourself in their shoes, understanding where they're coming from, and communicating your side. I seriously, it's like this burden, this weight that's lifted off your shoulders. You just feel relieved and like loved and just at peace. It's so liberating to apologize and mean it and know that they see where you were coming from, but you also see where they were coming from. And now you guys have both grown. You guys are both leaving this conversation happy, compromised, you know, and I'm not going to say everything's always going to go great. There's going to be times where things happen and miscommunications happen, even within the conversation afterwards. But again and again, you just have to try your best to love yourself enough to not victimize yourself when someone confronts you with something, right? Because I think that's something I struggled with a lot, that I'm still working on so hard, and that's something that I think a lot of white people really struggle with, is in general, is that when you're confronted with having like, you know, conditioned racism, like, you know, what I'm talking about with that is like subconscious, like you're not consciously hateful of anyone, but you have subconscious like prejudices and like racist ideologies. And when you're confronted with them, you don't love yourself enough to say, I'm still a good person and I fucked up and I need to work on that. Because you need to be able to forgive yourself. And that takes work. And some people aren't ready to do the work. Because I'm going to share a story in a minute that is very personal to me, about my life and my journey with learning how to love myself and then being able to confront myself. So I'm going to pin where we are in this moment in this conversation, kind of about learning to love yourself enough to forgive yourself. And I'm going to tell this story, and then it's going to finish with coming back to that. So this is probably one of the most impactful journeys I've taken in my life in terms of like identity, guilt, and privilege, is my journey in like religion and faith. It has truly been the biggest obstacle and just like path that I've taken in my life, and I've only really, really become confident and secure in how I feel in terms of where my identity intersects with religion and faith. And in like recent years, it's like I'm still young. I'm like only 21. Like, I'm not gonna say that when I was young I was so like whatever. I am still young, but like compared to my age now, I've only lived like probably a year or two of my life and of my entire other like 19 years secure and knowing of who I am. So this has really been like a big journey for me. So throughout my childhood, I kind of grew up in and out of both Catholic and Christian church. If you don't know like the difference, Catholic church tends to be kind of like the one you go to for like weddings and funerals, and like the one that some people's parents take them to like once a year on Christmas and Easter or something. It's like the pews, it's like big cathedral building, stained glass. Yeah, if you've never seen one, like it's nothing, the stained glass is oftentimes very beautiful. It is a very religious setting, so you have depictions of religious things, but the stained glass is nice, and the buildings are often quite nice and old and whatever. But yeah, hopefully you guys get the picture if you don't know exactly. It's like rows of benches, and the guy stands at the front in the robe and stuff. It's very like my best word for it would be like quote unquote old fashioned. It feels very old and traditional. And I mean that in like a very neutral way. Like I'm not trying to use those words negatively. It's just very like, it feels very traditional. Like people used to do this hundreds of years ago, like the same kind of style and everything. Like even some of the songs, like I just know they're 200 years old. But and then Christian church tends to be like kind of a more like quote unquote modern vibe. They sing a lot of like songs that are put out by like worship bands and stuff, like Christian bands that like exist today, kind of like modern pop music, but like make it Christian. And then they have like usually have like teen kid youth programs for like everyone. And a lot of the times they're actually in movie theaters for some reason. I think it's because you do like a karaoke for the first little part, and I'm very much only taking this from Christian churches I've been to. Like this doesn't apply to everyone, but like usually there would be like karaoke at first, and you would sing like all the modern pop songs or whatever, and they'd have them like up on the screen with like the lyrics. So I think like the movie theater worked for that. I don't know, but anyways, that's kind of the difference, is like kind of a very traditional versus like new vibe. But they're like kind of a part of the same umbrella of religion because they like both follow the same Bible. They're very similar, but Catholicism and Christianity are different. They do have like different aspects of them. The churches are like, I think the biggest differentiates of just like walking inside one of the two. You could just kind of tell. But anyways, I'm gonna move on. I'm just kind of trying to set the scene and like describe things, because I know like sometimes it's so hard not to assume that people know things because it feels so common knowledge. But like it would be so weird of me to sit here and just assume everybody knows the difference between Catholic and Christian church. So anyways, there it is. From what I've experienced, those are the big differences. So I started in Catholic church, and like a lot of kids I knew did, like your parents just kind of take you, they get you like baptized, but I didn't really know anything about church. Like I was too young to care about anything besides the little like pieces of bread that you could get in the middle of it. And like I hated going, but it wasn't because like of any moral confliction. Like I didn't really understand. I was just really bored, and like I was a kid. I wanted to play games and like have fun. I didn't want to wake up early on Sunday morning and like go to church. I'm not gonna like sit here and say like, oh, I was just like, I just knew something was wrong or whatever. Like I was a sassy kid. I know I challenged them, because I remember like my mom getting mad at me a couple times for like challenging things, but every kid does. It wasn't because I was like smart or better or like morally perfect child. It was just because like I wanted to be stubborn and I was like sassy and very privileged, so I just said whatever I wanted to say, and if I disagreed, I would just disagree. But anyways, I eventually talked my parents out of making me go, and I didn't go back to church for a long time until my dad started going to Christian church, and I would tag along with him sometimes. Like it was mostly because I wanted to do something with him. He's like not a very like adventurous, outdoorsy, like there's not a lot of activities that we could really do together besides like having dinner, like going on a walk or spending time at like my farm, which is like kind of my version of what a cottage is to a lot of people. So like church was something like if I was spending time at his house for the weekend or something, like I would go with him. I wasn't necessarily like super religious going into it, but something that Christian church does is they send out like this really uplifting message of like love and community and care and support. Like when you go, if you don't go in with any kind of like preconceived idea of what it may be like, It's, depending on where you go. I'm talking about the ones that I went to, and these aren't people that, you know, like you see in the. It's the same ideologies, but what I'm saying is that you go and you go to somewhere where they haven't said something like weird or off yet. Like, sorry, I'm just trying to clarify here that like, I know a lot of the time, people will say something like, "Oh, you wouldn't know at first," and it's like, and you're sitting there like they're literally wearing like hateful symbols on their jackets. But it's like this, what I'm describing is very much like, it's a very like, everybody's singing these songs, and it takes until the moment that they say something off where you're like, oh. And it might just be me. I think I went in like kind of really naive, and I probably overlooked a lot of things because I didn't know what to listen for at the time. I don't remember a lot of what they said, but I've just always been really interested in hearing like cultural teachings like the ones like written within the Bible, and learning to apply them to our world to make sense of what the writers were trying to convey. Like I still do that today. Like if any of my friends are listening, like you're gonna sigh right now, because like I always talk about like context of stories within the Bible, because I think it's so cool to read it with a perspective of understanding the actual message that they're trying to convey. It's super cool. Like I'm gonna do a whole episode on this, so like don't even worry, guys. But one thing is like, did I mention this? I might have said this in another episode. Okay, well, if I did, I'm just going to say it quick anyways again. One of the stories in the Bible is Jesus kind of saying when somebody slaps your cheek, turn the other cheek. And it's because, and a lot of people think, it's just like, hold your cheek high, like be the bigger person, don't like engage in violence. But what it actually was that when I think like when a Roman soldier would like slap someone in the cheek, if they slapped them twice, then it was like an acknowledgement that of this person's like personhood. So like one aspect of dehumanization when you have things like slavery and poverty, and hierarchy, is you don't see people in poverty as human beings and as equals to you. And that's like, we still have that today, but in context, as Roman soldiers did not see the Jewish people in Palestine as human beings. And it wasn't just Jewish people, it was just kind of everybody that was living in poverty. It was a lot of Jewish people that were living in poverty, specifically like Palestinian Jewish. And but I'm not going to get into like history. I'm not like an expert or anything. I didn't do any research, so I'm going to like try to step away from that. But just to close that point off, there was a lot of different groups that were oppressed then. I'm not saying that it was just Jewish people, but in the context of like the story from the Bible, a lot of what the Bible is a story about Jewish oppression and the history of the oppression of Jewish people. It's a very interesting set of cultural teachings. It's very cool to read from a non like religious point of view. It's cool to read from a religious point of view too, but just in my case, I'm not a very religious person. I still like reading it. I still like hearing the stories because of things like that. It's like when someone slaps your cheek and you turn your other cheek, either they have to slap you twice, which means that they acknowledge you as a person, or they have to slap you once, but leave the other cheek unslapped that you presented to them, which is like an improper slap or something like that. They had a lot of weird rules back then. We still have them now, but anyways, I just think like cool stories like that, because you hear a story, oh, he told them to turn their other cheek. It makes sense at first. So you might not look deeper. But when you look deeper, you realize that you completely misinterpreted what the text was meaning, because these were written like, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago? So obviously everything is going to need time to interpret. It's like, how we read Shakespeare in English class, and it takes us like weeks because we have to stop at every sentence to talk about what he's actually saying, because he just speaks in metaphors. And to me, a lot of cultural teachings are like that. You read them and you take the time and you go through them really slowly. So anyways, that's what I really liked, and that's why I would go to church a lot, is because I liked hearing how they would take like the stories and apply them to our world. And it's hard for me to sit here because who I am now, it's almost like I have to remember my mindset back then. But I did love the idea of being Christian, and for a long time, it was something that I identified with. I didn't go to church a lot. I liked listening to Christian music. I definitely probably had some weird ideas about things, mostly just because of what I heard. I can't ever remember having solid opinions on, topics like abortion and like kind of like homophobia and stuff. But one thing I do remember is that I was not a morally perfect child by any means, but when you're raised in like going to private school and in church and you're constantly told by everyone, be kind, be compassionate, be caring, be empathetic, all of these things, and you're told to help others, it kind of created a part of me that always wanted to be the hero. It was a very saviorist mindset. And there is a term called white saviorism. I don't want to use that term specifically because it is like kind of a scholarly term, and I don't think it's fair to be throwing around a lot of like terms that require outside reading and like definitions to understand. But just to kind of lay it out, because I'll be talking about like saviorism, kind of white saviorism sort of situation, is saviorism is that mentality where you're the hero and you're going to save everyone and you're going to be the hero. And it's a very, very individualistic mindset. And at the time, it's so crazy to look back because it didn't feel individual, because I wanted to be a hero for other people. It felt selfless. But who was I to like declare myself a selfless hero? You know what I mean? So it kind of created this mindset in me that I was like wanted to be a hero. It was a very saviorist mentality. That's what saviorist kind of is. When I bring that up, that's what it means. And so yes, like I was very critical of others. So a lot of the time I would go to a church and I would have to stop going because they would say something hateful. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have my own subconscious and like ideologies and like hates and everything like that. I definitely had internalized homophobia, internalized misogyny, internalized racism, internalized xenophobia. I had and still struggle with all of those things. But I was the savior. That was my mindset. I was different. I was better. So I was very critical of other people, but I wasn't looking inwards. So when I say like I left church because they were being hateful or they were being homophobic or they were being racist or they weren't being like kind or whatever, I wasn't leaving because I was an anti-racist. I was not homophobic. I didn't have any issues. I was morally perfect and I was better than them. It was because I had this ideology that I had to be better than them, that I was different than them. So I was very critical of other people. But I kind of just want to say that because I think a very important part of acknowledging that a lot of the times, especially for people in like my similar position of kind of like you don't suffer through a lot, but you want to be the savior because you are just raised individualistic. It took me a long time to start working on myself because I spent so much of my life trying to criticize what everybody else was doing because I didn't want to even consider that I wasn't doing the work, that I wasn't cool, that I was doing harmful things. And that's kind of when my life took a turn, is when I was able to do that. And we'll get there. So I just want to say before I start kind of that next journey of the story is that I'm not against faith. I'm not against believing in a higher power. I'm not against believing in life after death or reincarnation. I am not against looking to cultural teachings for guidance in your life. I believe that faith and beliefs are individual to everyone, and that's your journey and your right to have agency over however you choose. I truly believe that everybody has faith in their life, whether it be you have faith in a higher power, or you just have a faith in people, or a faith in yourself, or a faith in the earth, or whatever it may be. I think it's very important. I think that these things are important to people and important to cultures, and I never ever want to be talking about religion and be talking about negative things, and for someone to feel like I'm against faith and I'm against beliefs, because I'm truly not. I think that faith and beliefs are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing, and I've met so many people that are a part of so many different religions that are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people, and I would never, ever, ever put something like an umbrella or anything over all of you guys. What I do find problematic and have a problem with is institutionalized religion and oppressive religion, hate and violence. So that is what I'm against. And when I talk about religion, I'm going to try my best to, specify I'm talking about institutionalized religion, which is basically like, trying to find my best way to describe that, like, really simply. It kind of, to me, would just be like the fact that, like, church and, like, religion has its own market and its own, like, government body, and it's, like, intertwined in our society. It's become an institution that has caused a lot of harm to a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about, like, one religion here. I'm talking about a lot. Institutionalized religion oftentimes comes with somebody in power who wants to use institutionalized religion to push forward a certain agenda. And, like, I say this a lot, and I say this, when I say this, there's a lot of nuance in this, and I want to have a broader conversation around this, but a lot of government powers that have historically and even today used religion to justify themselves, and you see this in The Handmaid's Tale, they don't allow people that they're oppressing to read the documents, the religious text, because they know that it's not really about the religion. It's about the power. It's about the money. It's about the greed. It's about the selfishness. It's about harming other people. It's about violence. It's not about the religion. Because the same Bible that was used to justify colonialism is the same Bible that completely condemns it. And so, like, I think that's just such an interesting thing to come to terms with, is that it's religion, institutionalized religion is used to oppress people, but religion itself often condemns oppression. And when it becomes institutionalized, that's when other bodies, like governments, they get to pick and choose what they follow and what they don't, and how we interpret the message, because we don't take the time to read these things. Like, for me, the reason why it's absurd, some of the laws that they're passing in the States on the basis of religion and God, is crazy, because when you read the Bible, you realize that it condemns a lot of these behaviors. It's very much against it. And sure, yeah, there's passages that they use to justify it, but there's just as many that don't justify it. And that's really cool. And we're going to have a whole other episode on that. But anyways, I just wanted to make that clear. To me, there's a very big difference between faith and institutionalized religion, and I'm all for people having faith and having community in religion and everything like that, and I fully support that, and I think that we should always have that, and I don't think that should ever go away. So anyway, I wanted to say that before I get into this, because a lot of the time when you talk about religious trauma, people get really upset because religion does amazing things for them. So when I'm talking about the things that I struggled with in church, I'm not saying that I think that faith and religion and is bad and all people that go to church are like this. I very much don't think that, and I don't want anybody listening to get that interpretation, so I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Moving on, I eventually went on a mission trip with one of the churches that I briefly attended, and again, reflecting back, the hindsight is 2020. I can see clearly that I was naive and very sheltered into a narrow mindset of playing hero. I wanted to go and help them. Although I identified with Christianity, it wasn't that I wanted to go because of God. I wanted to go down because I thought I was just this hero, and I was going to go and help people, and I was so benevolent and selfless for going down and spending some of my summer help. I'm saying this as a joke because again, here's the guilt, right? And I'm still struggling with it. It's hard for me to even talk about now because I feel like joking about it isn't fair, because who am I to sit here and laugh at how harmful my behavior was? But hopefully you guys can forgive me. I'm learning to forgive myself, but I'm just laughing because it's awkward, not because I think it's funny. Anyways, while I was there, I had experiences that completely changed my life. Looking back, this is truly, and this is why I shared this story, this is where I started a new path than the one I was on before. Because going into Paraguay, my mindset that I was going to grow up, I was going to have my own not-for-profit, I was going to change the world, I was going to be a hero, I was going to do all these amazing things. And then I went to Paraguay and I met a lot of people, and a lot of them were teenagers, my age. And because they were my age and I went with a lot of adults, we got pretty close. And I think too, because although I did identify with Christianity, I didn't grow up like a lot of the other kind of teenagers my age on that trip grew up. I was I was on my way into public school. I wasn't necessarily a huge rule follower. So I think that kind of established a bit of trust in us, was that they kind of got the vibe from me that I didn't really care if they didn't like someone or if they were breaking the rules or something, you know what I mean? Anyways, again, I'm going back to the savior mentality. I'm even doing it right now in an episode talking about it. It's so crazy how these ideologies are so ingrained into you that now I'm trying to explain a story and I feel so guilty about it that I'm putting myself back in a saviorist mindset. I'm admitting it out loud, not because I'm proud of it, but because I'm trying to be vulnerable so that you guys may be able to pick up on this in your own lives. But anyways, somehow, some way, they trusted me enough to share stories with me about some of their experiences with church groups that came down to do mission trips. And although I want to say that there are needs in a lot of places, people, of course, they need houses and stuff, but they also need you to see them as people and people that are capable. Because one thing that I've learned a lot in university is that us in the global north, which is kind of what you would call US, Canada, a lot of Europe, Russia, even the Middle East in some ways, just kind of I'm not sure all the countries that technically constitute the global north, but it's pretty much if you look at a map, the north half of the map minus some of it is actually a part of the global south. The global north is a smaller top than the global south is, because that requires another episode. Anyways, that's not even what I was talking about at all. There's a lot of need in the global south, but a lot of the times what we do is we go down there, and when I say we, I'm talking about mission trips, I'm talking about not-for-profits, I'm talking about even me-to-we stuff, right? So we go down there and we're going to fix this for them. We're going to help them. But helping them isn't going down and just doing all of these things and then leaving. And what we don't understand is that when we go back to our own countries, a lot of the lifestyle that we live is actually further contributing to the harm that we tried to go and fix. And a large part of that isn't our fault, but at the same time, if we can all become aware of it, we can start to change it. That requires another episode. We will get into that another time. But anyways, they shared these stories with me, and they challenged me. They trusted me enough to challenge me. And looking back, I don't know why. I don't know why. I feel so grateful. I feel like I didn't deserve that because I didn't. I was also participating in a very harmful ideology, but I think it's just because I was somehow in some way, maybe because of my youth or like whatever, that they saw something in me and they trusted me enough to tell me these things. I'm getting emotional because I remember that moment so well. And I was just like, I wasn't shocked because I don't want to say that I wasn't that naive to think that, you know, these kids were mistreated somehow by some people. But it just, I think what it did is it was like, look, because I had always glanced at the problem. I had always considered it. I had always pondered it. It had always teased it, but I never like what I'm imagining like in my head. I always think in metaphors and like scenarios. I'm looking out a window and I always pass by this window every day and something is off, something is weird, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to look at it. So I know it's there and I just don't really want to think about it or do anything about it because it's not me. I'm not doing that. It's not my problem. I'm just gonna. But then what they did is they sat me down in front of that window and they were like, look at what you guys do when you come here. And I just like, I remember feeling so guilty that instead of taking that opportunity to apologize to them, I immediately put myself back in that savior mindset. Oh, they told me about this. I'm different than them. I'm better than them. I'm going to be better than them. Like, don't you guys worry. I'm going to start my own organization and I'm going to be better than them. And like, it's going to be better. And like looking back, I'm so grateful that I'm still in touch with all these people and I've been able to like talk to them over the years and they've seen me grow and change. And like, I don't even know how they found the patience for me in that moment because I never apologized to them. I did like later on, but I mean in that moment, like I look back and I wish so badly that I would have sat there and said, I'm so sorry. You know, but I didn't. Instead, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they do that. It was never, I can't believe I can't believe I went on that trip too. But it was because I was so guilty, I didn't even want to go there. And so this was a time where I didn't challenge myself to grow because I didn't want to admit that I was wrong and work on myself because it challenged my identity. I was the hero. I was going to be a hero. I was going to change the world. I was a good person. I was going to make a difference. But what happened is I wasn't sure of that. I wasn't confident in who I was. I didn't love myself enough to allow myself to make mistakes and not let it completely change who I was to myself. If I had admitted to myself at that time that I did something harmful, and if I came back and I said to my friends, yeah, like, you know, I actually realized like I've been wrong this whole time and I went on that trip and I think I actually hurt some people in different ways. I couldn't do that because I had to be a good person. I had to come home and be like, guys, guess what I found out about everyone else except for me on that trip. Everyone else is the problem, not me though. I'm not saying that they didn't have their own problems. They were very problematic, but I was also being problematic and I didn't want to go there. And I can see that now, but I didn't feel like it at the time. I was just a good person. I was a hero. But anyways, so in my identity, like, I spent my entire life pointing fingers at everybody else. I was never critical of myself because I was a good person. I was kind. I was compassionate. I cared. I helped people. I stood up for other people. I stood up to bullies, like, whatever, right? And it was like, but I never stood up to myself. I never held myself accountable. I never learned how to grow. I never learned how to present myself differently in the world than the way I intended to and the way that I want to. I just kind of assumed that I was already perfect and lived my life that way. And that's definitely something that a lot of, especially like wealthy white individuals, experience in their lives. And I want you guys to know that you're allowed to say that you were privileged and you were naive and that you were being dumb and that you messed up, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, and it doesn't mean that you did it on purpose, and it doesn't mean that nobody will ever forgive you, and it doesn't mean that you knew at the time. You know, it's a hard journey, and although you don't have every right to forgive yourself, you do have the right to start making changes in your life, start reflecting back, start learning, start growing. And then when you get to a point where you have actually changed and made that behavior better, you will find that you will actually you won't have to sit down and say, I forgive myself for that. You will realize that you did the work and you are deserving of forgiveness, and you will just give it to yourself. You won't even have to ask. You won't have to convince yourself you forgive yourself. It will just happen because you will be able to say, what have I done to deserve forgiveness? And you'll be able to look back and actually name things. I did this. I read these books. I met with these people. I started going to these groups. I, started volunteering with grassroots organizations that's a big one for me, is like that focus on, mutual aid, which is a concept of like both meeting people's immediate needs, like what a lot of mission trips and volunteer trips do, which is like building houses, bringing food, getting clean water and stuff like that, meeting people's immediate needs, but also then organizing against the systems that create the problems in the first place. And when you do those things, when you take those actions and those steps forward, you'll learn that forgiveness will come naturally. So, yeah, realizing my own hypocrisy was humiliating, quite humiliating, actually. And the change didn't happen when I got home from that trip. If anything, I think my mindset of saviorism was actually accelerated because I got to play the hero again. I got to be different than everyone. I was the one they trusted to tell me all of these stories. I was the one that's going to be better. So I think honestly it made it worse. But now, years later, looking back, I'm glad I was able to have that experience because it's helped me grow when I started doing the work. So kind of as I grew up and I became more secure in my identity, I became to feel more and more comfortable in admitting that I did something that caused harm, but not allowing it to make me feel guilty and ashamed that I start to victimize myself and attach it to my identity, which is where I was at the beginning of the story, where I said we'd circle back to after I finished. So this is where we're back at now. Loving yourself is the first step to overcoming debilitating guilt. Because when you love yourself, you are patient with yourself. When somebody confronts you with something and they say, hey, you messed up, and they ask you to admit it, when you don't love yourself, what happens inside is you're like, oh my God, because you don't have anything in yourself that's telling you it's okay. You just messed up. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to say bad things sometimes. All you have to do is apologize. You are deserving of love. You are deserving of forgiveness. You are deserving of care. If you don't have that in yourself that's reminding you of that, of course you're going to respond to confrontation with anger and defensiveness and selfishness and even narcissism, because you want to defend yourself, right? Because you're not defending yourself in your heart. You're defending yourself outside. You're defending yourself to this person. But if you were actually defending yourself and saying, I didn't intend to do that, if you were actually secure and you felt like it was okay, then you wouldn't be defensive. Because like I was saying earlier with that story about my friend, I can't say that I would have responded the same a couple years earlier. And when she said that to me, of course I wanted to get defensive. I know that I'm a good friend, and I know that I care about her so much, and I just wanted what was best for her. And I was worried about her because she had said something earlier and all of these things. And I, of course, but because I was able to know in my heart that she loves me, I still love me, I'm still just as good of a friend, it doesn't change who I am that I made a mistake, that I was able to be like, yeah, I did make you feel that way, didn't I? That sucks. I'm really sorry. Like, that was a bad move on my part. Like, because I was able to give myself grace and allow myself to make mistakes. And that's what I really hope that you guys start working on in your own lives and stuff, is being able to give yourself grace to make mistakes. Because there is something so beautiful in somebody confronting you and then communicating through it and leaving that conversation. Because every time I think about my friend confronting me, I don't feel angry, I don't feel upset, I don't feel guilty, it doesn't give me anxiety. I just think about how lucky I am to have a friend that was honest with me. And I look at it that since she told me that, she trusted me enough, and she knew that I was a good enough friend to her that she could tell me that, and I wouldn't freak out at her, and I wouldn't yell at her, and I wouldn't get mad at her. So I could look at it like she thinks I'm a bad friend because I called her and I said this. But no, she thinks I'm a good friend because she communicated with me and she opened up to me and was vulnerable with me when I could have completely shut her down. But she trusted me enough to tell me anyways. So what I want you guys to do is start rephrasing your life and rephrasing these moments that you're having with people, because I think a lot of the time when we respond defensively and when we feel guilty, we allow the guilt to not let us move forward. We stick ourselves in the ground. And so, like, in this world, when we're confronted with the idea that we did something shitty or that we were wrong about something, we're not taught to separate our actions from our identity, right? So a big thing in this is privilege, right? I have white privilege. I have wealthy class privilege. I have academic privilege. I have a lot of privileges in my life. And one thing that I've had to learn about privilege is that it's not something that I shouldn't want and that I should want to give away to somebody else. Like, I should feel so guilty about having privilege. Like, I should just give it to somebody. I should wake up every day looking at myself in the mirror like, I can't believe I have this privilege. I should wake up every day. Everybody should have this privilege. It's not that I shouldn't want it. It's that I should want it for everybody. And when you start shifting that mindset of out of yourself and into your community, you heal. You just heal. It's so healing. Because to me, one of the biggest parts in starting this podcast and learning to write papers in university is learning to be able to talk about my privilege, in which is very uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable thing because I have a lot of it. And it makes you feel so guilty. And there are so many times in my life where I struggle with feeling guilty, and I don't even want to tell people things sometimes because I know that what their reaction is, and I don't want to be perceived as like a stereotype of that. Oh my god. Did I just say I don't want to be received as a stereotype? Okay, hold on. I'm taking a minute to decide if I still want that in there. I do. I do. I think this episode about guilt is a good time to just leave something like that in there. But I want you guys to know it's okay if you don't want to be stereotyped. It's just like it's wasn't the right moment for me to say something like that because that's not fair. But anyways, I'm going to try and convey that differently because that was awkward. But yeah, I think I feel guilty with privilege sometimes, so I don't admit things and then people find out. And it feels like I want to hide things from people because I'm afraid of like owning it, you know? Like I don't want people to think that I'm proud of having privileges that other people don't. So it's a really hard thing. It's difficult. And I think that one thing that we're not taught to do is separate that from who we are, right? Is that I have said racist things, I've said homophobic things, I've said misogynistic things, I've said xenophobic things, I've seen anti-Semitic things, said anti-Semitic things. I've said a lot of things that I regret and that weren't right, but it doesn't make who I am. Who I am is how I responded. Who I am is the person that's sitting here today and telling you guys that I was wrong. Who I am is somebody that wants to be better, that wants to try hard to be a good person, that loves other people. And I learned all those things about who I am. And all of a sudden, if I make a mistake, it doesn't become who I am anymore because I know who I am. I know exactly who I am. I know my values, I know my morals, and I know that I'm always learning and I'm always growing. And, you know, I'm not saying I know who I am going to be for the rest of my life, but I know who I am right now, and who I am isn't somebody that wants to be hateful. So if somebody says, hey, that was racist, instead of being like, oh my God, they think I'm racist, and then freaking out and like defending myself, what I do is I'm like, yeah, that was. I shouldn't say something like that. It's like what I just said about, like, I don't want to be stereotyped. It's like, I could get defensive and say, like, oh, you know what I meant, right? It's like, I could have posted that and not said anything. One of my friends would have definitely texted me and been like, Vic, come on. And I would have had to been like, you know what I meant, or whatever. I could be defensive about it because that would mean I wasn't secure in the fact that that wasn't my intention, right? But because I know that that wasn't my intention, I know that's not who I am, I know that's not how I want people to hear that, then it was automatically like, oh, well, I said something off. But it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change why I want to sit here in this chair and talk into this microphone to you guys all the time. It doesn't change that because I know who I am and I know how my heart is, and I love myself and I give myself grace. And I'm just like, well, I said something weird, and you laugh it off, right? And it's like, I don't have the power to forgive myself on behalf of others, but I am allowed to say something, be like, whoop, that was crazy, and then think about it for a second and move on. And then forgiveness comes, right? But anyways, to kind of close off, because we're getting to the end here, a very common response to someone who's confronted for a hateful action is to respond with, well, I guess I'm just a bad person. It is so common to hear this from people and it's hard for me, and I want to like have someone, you know, in psychology come on and talk about this, maybe like a professor or somebody that's like kind of well versed. It's like, why is it that people can say something like that in order to avoid apologizing and confronting the idea they did something wrong? Like, it's almost easier to admit flat out that you're a completely bad person than it is to admit that you made a mistake and that you're not a bad person. Like, it's definitely the society, right? And there's so many complicated nuances. There's not really an answer, and I really want to have like a podcast discussion, like I said, but it's just very interesting that we don't want to go there. We don't want to do the work to be better. We'll just be like, I don't care, I guess I'm just a bad person. And that's because guilt is paralyzing, right? So when you skip right to, I guess I'm just a bad person. What you're doing is you're shutting down your guilt, right? You're not feeling it. You're not expressing it. You're not being vulnerable with it. You're feeling guilty on the inside, but you're pushing it down. You're being like, I don't feel bad. I guess I'm just a bad person, not guilty. Like, you know what I mean? Versus like when you're like, oh my God, that was not right of me to say. I'm so sorry. It kind of forces you to feel guilty. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling. And so, like, I'm not trying to like give you guys homework or anything, but if you want to, I want to hear from you guys about times in your life where you responded very defensively to something. And I want you to think about how you would respond now, thinking about everything I just said. Okay, so like, it doesn't mean you've had to do the work, but just sit down for a second and just think about like, how could I have responded to that differently and non-defensively, you know? And I don't want you guys to get into this guilty mindset like I should have known better. We all make mistakes and we're all learning and growing. You were probably just a child. We're all there's adults that listen to this too. I always forget that my audience is also adults, but a lot of us are still just kids, right? And so it's okay if you messed up and you made a mistake. I just want you to like take a minute to look back and like think about a time when you wish you could have responded to something differently. Or you know what, even better, maybe reach out to that person and say, hey, I just want you to know that I've been thinking about what you said to me, and you're right, I did mess up and I did say that, and I'm sorry that I made you feel that way, or whatever. I'm not giving you guys homework, like you don't have to, but just maybe like something you could do to kind of like take away from this episode and to help you guys grow, because it's something that I was faced with and something that I took the time to do with a few people that I knew in my past. And it felt really good, and I feel really good about it now. So yeah. We live in a culture of blame and punishment. We see it in our prison system. We see it in our court system. We see it in our identity wars, like whether it be between like men versus women, or like, you know, straights versus gays, or like blacks versus whites. We have identity wars all over the place. We blame and we punish each other, and we just want to punish. And that's one of my favorite things about a lot of indigenous teachings and a lot of black feminists, when they write about abolition feminism and they write about restorative justice and transformative justice and healing justice. What you do is you think about other ways to heal the community without punishing each other. Because I think one thing that I've really learned is that in all my journey with my privilege is that the times where I've really learned and grown the most is when someone met me with compassion. And I'm not saying that people owe it to you. If you're being hateful and you're being rude, they don't have to be nice to you. But the times where I've really learned and grown is when someone's taken the time to listen to me and then been like, hey, Vic, I understand you feel that way, but you're not being cool right now. And when they did that, it allowed me to know that they heard me, they understood me, but they also were asking me to change and telling me to be better. And that's where I hope to get with this podcast eventually is I want to hold space for people to communicate with each other and just talk about things. It's so hard these days to have conversations because you get so angry and wrapped up in your guilt and wrapped up in your identity, and you create an identity around all of these societal things that you don't take the time to ask yourself who you are. Because for me, right, when people ask me like, you know, who are you? I don't automatically think of, oh, you know, I'm a Canadian, I'm 21, I'm you know, I'm not religious, I'm, my grandpa's from Belgium, like all of these things, right? It's like, yeah, those things are a part of my identity, but they're not a part of a core of who I am. The core of who I am is Victoria. I'm not anything else. My personality's been shaped and influenced by a lot of those outside things in my life, but I think what happens a lot of the time when we try to have conversations about things is we create our identity around systems and institutions, and then when those things are criticized, we feel like we're being attacked, and so we don't listen. Because I think that's one thing that I've really had to learn in like political ideology and stuff, is that the best conversations I've had with people that don't necessarily agree with me are times where I've been like, okay, I am going to listen to what they're saying, and I am going to understand that if they will take the time to have a conversation with me and communicate with me and listen to what I'm saying, then I should try my best to try to understand them. Because what we're doing is we're not agreeing to disagree. We're not meeting in the middle. I'm saying, you have listened to my opinion. You have read my opinion. You are listening to me. Now I'm going to extend that favor back to you. It doesn't mean that I'm going to agree at the end. It's not going to mean that we're going to find a common ground. It just means that we're going to have a conversation in which both of us are critiquing things, but we're not critiquing each other. Because I think a lot of the time when we critique things, especially politics, people are like completely identified with their political party. They can't even fathom somebody criticizing that. And it's like, it's hard. But what I want you guys to know is just take some time to get to know yourself. Who are you outside of your gender and sexuality and social class and race and ethnicity and nationality and age and all of these things, disabilities? Who are you outside of those things? Who are you in your core? Who do you feel like? Like, because you are just you, there's nobody else like you. There's a lot of people that are probably similar to you, but they're not you. And you are not just the sum of your social identities. You're more than that. You know who you are. And sometimes you know yourself best. So 2 things I want you guys, I hope that you guys can take away from this, is that what I really want is for everybody to get to know yourself and to respect yourself and to love yourself enough that when you are faced with a mistake that you've made, it doesn't cripple you out of growing and changing. Because I still go there sometimes, and those are the moments that I look back on that I regret the most, because it's so hard to take it back rather than being able to deal with it then. Like some people are do it and then ask for forgiveness, and some people are like, ask for permission instead of forgiveness sort of people. And I think there's a fine balance, but I just really hope that you guys are able to take some time to get to know yourself and to sit down with yourself and learn about who you are and think about the kind of person you want to be. And when you're faced with a mistake that you've made or something wrong that you've done and you feel guilty for it, try to use that guilt to understand that the reason you're feeling bad is because you know that you did something wrong and something wasn't right and you feel bad. So apologize, put yourself in their shoes, try to understand where they're coming from, even if it wasn't your intention. It's okay if you didn't mean to, right? But it still happened. And apologize, communicate, and then grow and change and try to do better. And it's amazing when you get told what you're doing wrong, because it's a chance to fix it. Sometimes it's not always nice to hear. Sometimes people don't always deliver things the way that would be most helpful, but that's why we have to be in tune with who we are and to love and respect ourselves, because when we're met with confrontation that makes us feel uncomfortable and makes us feel attacked, you are like, okay, take a deep breath. You did something wrong. This person is reacting. The most you can do is say, I'm so sorry. Try to put yourself in their shoes, try to understand where they're coming from, and then try to grow and change and be different if that's what you want to do. So I hope that you guys take a lot away from this. I hope that I hear you guys' thoughts about these topics. I hope that I can do more episodes where people come on and kind of share stories about their lives similar to the one that I told in this episode. Like always, feedback is great. If there's anything you guys think that I should have said differently or should have mentioned that I didn't cover, just like shoot me a message and I will talk about it in the beginning of next episode. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go because this has been very long, but I hope it was all enjoyable. I will see you guys, well, not see you, I guess, but I will talk to you guys very soon. All right. Have a good, whenever you're listening to this, week, weekend, whatever. All right. Bye.